So last time we talked about the for loop and introduced looping, and we've seen how we can run some code repeatedly based on some condition. And if you remember, we mentioned that we can have a variable, we initialize a variable here, and have a condition, an afterthought, which is an expression being executed every after iteration of every loop. So one thing that I forgot to mention last time, let me remove this first. And as you can see, we have the expression being I++, which means we increase I or increment I by 1 every single time we finish an iteration. But you're not limited to just saying I++, you're not just limiting to increment I by 1. We can do something different. We could set I and change the expression, for example, to be I plus, instead of I plus 1, which is the same as I++, we could do I plus 2 or I plus 3, which will then reduce the amount of times the I has to be repeated, the loop has to be repeated, because now instead of having it to run 5 times, now we are incrementing I plus 3, so we're starting at 0, and then we're incrementing I by 3, which will make I becomes 3 in the second iteration, and then in the third, and then after we finish the second iteration, we're going to increment I by 3 again, making it 6, and then that condition would be false. That means that we're running this loop only twice. So let me demonstrate that by console logging I to see it in action. And as you see, 0 and then 3, and then the loop has ended. And you can control the expression as much as you need depending on what criteria or what situation you're having. So remember we talked about arrays, and we mentioned that arrays are variables which can hold multiple values. So instead of creating many variables and having to set them to values, we can create just one variable and have it to have most of the values, and we could do that if the values are related. So let me create an array, and I'm going to call it my array, and then I'm going to put it square brackets, as you remember, and then putting the values inside of those square brackets. So I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now that array has the value of the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we have this loop. So let's say that I have here 5 values, right? What if I want to execute the same code like the console log, but instead of printing out the index, I want to print out the values of these numbers. And you might be thinking, okay, we can do that using my array. As you remember, we said that we can get the value of one of the values of the array by using the array name and then putting the square brackets and accessing the index, which is true. And let me run this, but first let me change the expression from I plus 3 to I plus plus so we can get every index from 0 to 5. So as you see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are the values inside of the array. So it worked. We looped through the values of the array. But we have a problem here. We've set this condition, and this is a number, and it's not dynamic. So we set this number because I know that the array has 5 values. But what if I don't know how many values the array have? What if it's 100? Well, it's 250, but I don't know that number. How am I going to set this value here? The condition. So that leaves us with a special keyword that we use. We use the array name, and then we have a property called length. And you're probably asking, how do you get this like length property? Do you remember when we talked about objects and said whenever we have an object, you can access a property using the dot operator and then the name of the property? That's correct. Array, if you remember, when we console logged its type, it's a special type of object, which means it's an object. Then that's why whenever we create an array, it's an object, and we still can access some properties. And you might be like, we never created that object, and we never created that length property the way we learned. But that's a no problem, because if you don't know, we still have built-in objects just like the array. And an array is basically an object, a built-in object, and it has this length property built for us already. And then we initialize the array, and automatically the array object calculates how many values are in there using this length property. That's why now if I reload, I'm still gonna get the same values, but now it's dynamically. So if I set this to like 6, 7, 8, or whatever the number that we don't even know, probably sometimes whenever you're coding, you're having an array and you don't know how many elements inside. So basically, the dot length property will find out the length of an array and it will give you the exact number that needs to be in the condition. So let's run this and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I never even changed the condition.